I would like to clarify the difference between Kabbalah, or at least spirituality as Kabbalah explains it, and religion as we know it today. They're not the same, are they, Dr. Leichman?
They are completely not the same, and they're actually opposite to each other. Because if we really go back to Abraham, who was the origin of all that, he was a person who discovered the general law of nature. And according to that law, we humans are interconnected. We exist in a system of connections between us that we don't sense. Sometimes it becomes more apparent to us, and sometimes less. But generally it's hidden. And Abraham was a person who discovered that this connection exists, and it is hidden in nature. And by the gradual development of humanity, that connection has to become apparent.
Well, when you say hidden, do you mean that it's there but inactive, or active but we don't see it?
It is active, but it is active in a way that we don't sense it, that we don't detect it.
But is it affecting us?
Of course it is, yes. That system exists, and we are constantly connected. It's only hidden to our senses, and we do not identify, we do not detect that we influence each other, that we are connected in a global, comprehensive way. But that connection gradually becomes apparent.
Even then, in Abraham's days?
From the days of Abraham. Actually, in the days of Abraham, it was revealed for the first time. Abraham was just one of the Babylonians, where humanity lived as a small civilization in that area of Mesopotamia, and there was actually a physical connection between all of them. They all spoke one language. They had a very minimal civilization, as if all sharing the same mindset, and suddenly they discovered that they are connected to each other, dependent on each other, on the other hand, hateful towards each other. Actually, it's normal. Each and every person has his own ego. And then they stopped understanding each other.
Yes, the mixture of the languages.
Right. And as a result, they decided that they just need to move away from each other. According to their nature, if I hate you and you hate me, so it's better to be apart. And if we're apart, then we can be connected in a different way with each other. You know,
over the internet.
Yeah. According to the closeness or hatred we have between each other, we determine some sort of a relation between us, some sort of a way of communication.
A safe distance.
Right. So Abraham discovered that law of nature, that we are all interconnected, and that we have to realize that connection. So he said something which was opposite. He said, we have to use a method which is now called Kabbalah, which means we are all interconnected. It is like that by nature, but we have to realize that connection, meaning we have to change our qualities to what is called love thy friend as thyself, because this is something nature demands from us. Nature is inclusive, integral, global. And in those books where it's written about Abraham, it says that Abraham looked outside, looked at the animals, at the stars, at the skies, and he was able to see everything as one picture.
Yes, Maimonides explains beautifully about that. Yes. He provides a beautiful description. Yes.
Yeah, so he realized that people, humans too, are not outside of nature. They are also an integrated part of nature, but as opposed to the inanimate, vegetative, and animate levels, man is egoistic. He violates that balance. He wants to take advantage of others. Animals eat each other up by nature, by instinctive urges. People want to take advantage of each other because of their egoism, which is above the necessities they need to exist. So he explained all that, but unfortunately they didn't want to hear.
Why not?
because man's nature is such that he likes using his ego the way he does and just continue in that path. This is why just a small group of people joined Abraham. He formed a group from them. They implemented his method, and that group of people started calling themselves Israel, which is a combination of two words, yashar kel, which means straight towards the Creator. And the Creator or nature are one and the same. So that method was called the Abrahamic method, which says that man has to transcend his egoism towards love of others. That is the whole method of Abraham. And how to do it practically is what he talked about. How to rise above the ego towards love of others.
So basically this is the tenet that is afterwards adopted by the religions.
That's a question. Because after 2,000 years later, let's say, that same group who called itself the people of Israel already lived by those principles in Egypt and then in the land of Israel, and they came to a state where the ego nevertheless overcame them, ruled over them. And they became just like those Babylonians in the past. They didn't want to have those bonds of love between them, those connections. And they also began to move away from each other, to hate each other, to be egoistic towards each other. And that connection of love between them was stopped. And that was called the ruin or the destruction. And instead of love, that connection they had between them, it turned into something called religion, Judaism.
And what is the difference?
The difference is simple. We are egoistic. We are not thinking about correcting our egos and really feeling love towards each other as one man in one heart. Instead, we just take those words, those customs as external behavior, external customs, anything but the real correction of our nature. We read all sorts of books that were written about it, such as the Torah, the prophets, and so on, what Abraham wrote, even the Kabala books. We are willing to use all of that, but not for our inner correction. That, we say, leave that alone. We want to stay the way we are, don't demand that from us. That is what is called religion. First of all, the same group called the people of Israel that realized the love of others, that love between them. They existed as one man in one heart, as one big family. First of all, they lost that state, and they began to be just like ordinary people, just like how we exist today in this world.
Yes, this is explained in all the writings. It's very clear that this is what happened to them.
After that, the other nations started adopting those methods of that were like Judaism, but every nation adopted it in their own fashion. This is how Christianity was created, and 500 or 700 years later, the Islam was created. So all those religions are basically talking about rules that were determined about the relations between people, which form a nation's culture, a nation's framework, but it has nothing to do with the actual correction of egoism to the point of love between people. And this is something that only existed back in that root, with Abraham, who said we have to correct our ego towards love, and the religions are not about it at all.
But the thing is that it's very interesting for me to see that millions of people consolidated around that principle. So if none of them practices it, how could they still unite around a tenet that is impractical for them and that they have no intention of doing?
Well, they built all sorts of systems for themselves, which they call love thy friend as thyself. They can say that. They have all kinds of services to help each other. They have all their seminaries or synagogues, and they create various systems to help the needy or help the orphans, or all kinds of things. You can't say all of that doesn't exist, but that is not in the direction of the correction we're talking about, the correction of our nature towards what's called love thy friend. Let's put it this way. A person who has faith in the upper force, in reward and punishment, and thinks that he will be rewarded by doing good to others and by not doing bad things to others, and that if he will behave in a bad way towards others, he will be punished, that is something that the religions present in a very clear way. It does provide some sort of it takes people away from barbarian behavior into some ethical behavior, some sort of moral behavior. Throughout history, a religious person had
A code,
some sort of
moral code.
yes, let's say a code or a regulation inside of him, manner of behavior. And this is why they behaved the way they did, because they wanted to earn, to benefit the next world. But in fact, all of that is not correcting the ego. It works in order to give you benefit here and in the next world.